Welcome, Chip, to the World XP podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. I know heard all sorts of stories and all sorts of wonderful things, and I know you're a very busy person, so really appreciate your time. Welcome.
Glad to be here. It'll be fun.
So one of the stories that I know, obviously, and for those listening, Chip was a former ESPN or ABC sports reporter back in the day before I really knew what that was. But so he has a pretty good handle on the world of media. And I was thinking in the car on the way back from practice today, one of the things I wanted to ask him was, we've seen this giant shift in media generally over the last couple decades. And since you were a part of it, I wanted to get your thoughts before we get into more your story, because that's something that's been very curious for me to watch, especially the last 5 to 10 years. But you've been a part of it and you've seen the shift yourself. So what sort of thoughts do you have? What do you think caused it? Like anything?
Well, a lot is taking place in a short amount of time. And for your generation, Eric, that's the way the world is now. It's much faster. Things happen quickly. And especially with these internets and computers and gizmos, things happen very quickly. But in my day, when I first started doing stuff with ABC, really ABC and CBS were about the only people doing college football. I mean, ESPN was not really even mentioned. It was called the 4-letter there for a long time because that's all anybody knew to call them. So bowl games, and I'll give you a prime example of this, bowl games, ABC, the big three on New Year's Day, the Citrus Bowl, followed the Rose Bowl, and then the Sugar Bowl. And if you had a chance to broadcast any of those three, you would hit the jackpot. So those were the big bowls. I mean, that was a big day of college football. And now with the internet, and that's totally changed everything. It would take me a long time to go through all of that. But because I had the ABC background and I was working at a station in Richmond, Virginia, I was the only person working for ABC at the time that I was working for them, and that you're talking about 99, 2000, 2001 mostly. There wasn't anybody that did what I did Monday through Friday that did the college football with ABC on the weekends. And that changed with the internet. And when ESPN first decided they want to go, that your apps, you go to your phone now, your apps, you can see everything on that phone. They called and said, look, we know it's hard for you to do games, especially that were outside about a 3 or 4 hour window, because I would be doing the late high school football show on Friday night and I'd have to get somewhere for the Saturday game. That was tough. So they said, we know you like this part of, not having a long drive and not having all the meetings, because we'd have meetings about meetings with ABC and I loved them, but boy, there were a lot of meetings. And so by doing it on the app, which now every game is on the app, as you can tell, you can put up your screen every single week and you can see everybody's game. So it was less cameras, it was less graphics, it was less folks involved to do it. But I told them very quickly that this was the gold mine. And I can remember going to Maryland and doing a game with Maryland, playing Central Michigan or Eastern Michigan. I can't remember which one it was. One of the first ones that they did. And they asked me afterwards, I said, I think it's great. I said, folks don't care about 80 million graphics. Folks don't care about 80 million cameras. They just want to see the game. And so I did a bunch of games, maybe 2002, 2003, even 2004, before it really just exploded. So for me to go from when it really wasn't very many games, and it was a very small circle of folks who did college football with ABC, and CBS had the SEC package even then, such a small number to now a gargantuan number. And that's changed everything. And then the other thing that's changed, and I'm going a long way with this, I know, but it kind of will help you understand it. Now the conferences, so like the Southern Conference, and I'm going to use that as a conference to talk about, has teams like VMI in it in the Citadel. What you do is, if you're the home team, you do the broadcast for the game that would be carried on the conference and on the ESPN app. The away team is just the away team. So you're trying to do the broadcast as straight down the middle as you can, just like everybody else would do a broadcast. So now you don't have the expense of trying to do every game. You're doing half the season usually. And that has gone into almost all of the conferences now, except for the big ones, because it saves money, but you also get every game up. And, you know, this device, the guys on the golf course, the folks at home having big gatherings, I mean, everybody can see it, and it's very easy to get to the apps. So the apps continue to change. And well, I think it's great because the more exposure, I think, the better it is for college football, for example. And that's the one I'm using because that's the one that's really exploded with it. But now it's college basketball too. And now you can see a lot of the other sports that were never carried that are coming on, and they're on all the time now. And I think that's going to continue to be the growth process. So a long answer, I know, for a big question, but there's so many different facets I could take you through of the changes in that. And it's been drastic, and it's fun to have been a part of it, because there are times I go, wow, this is really mind blowing of what has taken place. And it still is mind blowing because of how many other things that they're doing. But, you know, you can sit at home and go on your internet, and you could probably see 20 or 30 football games every single week. And that's just at one time slot. And, you know, that happens all day and through the evening. So I think it's opened the doors to more availability, and it's also a lot less expensive for networks to carry. That's why ESPN's app is so popular now, because you can see about all the conference games for, you know, most every conference on that app. So it's really amazing what's taking place. But I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's really different.
It's really cool to see. Like, 5 years ago, I never would have considered paying for ESPN Plus, but now I do, because they have all the European soccer leagues on there, or most
Correct.
of them anyways.
Yes.
And before we get going, because I had a bunch of thoughts that came off your answer, can you do a real quick introduction of like your involvement? I know you said you did the high school shows, and then you did some of the ABC sports, but just do a real quick run through so that people listening know.
So I spent 26 years in day-to-day television. I was a sports director in Richmond, Virginia, the last one, which is where I live now. Before that, I was in Asheville, North Carolina, Birmingham, Alabama, and then my first job was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I was a weekend sports anchor there. 26 full-time years of just doing the daily sports. So what used to be, you know, kind of like the newspaper of the day, you'd have a 6 o'clock show and an 11 p.m. show, and then you'd tape for the morning show. Did that, and also started hustling on the side to do college football, because that was something I always wanted to do. So I worked with groups like Fox Sports South. It's no longer like Fox Sports South anymore, but they had the Southern Conference package. And then I worked with other groups along the way. And that's kind of how you moved up, and then was very fortunate when they started doing some more regional broadcast. ABC was great about doing that. They might decide they wanted to do a couple of games out of the ACC one week, and I could get a phone call, hey, could you go do the sidelines? And this started maybe the middle 90s of, hey, would you do the sidelines of Virginia Tech? Well, heck yeah, that's a pretty easy ride. It was an hour from UVA and 3.5 hours to go to Virginia Tech. So those were easy to do. But to get that opportunity opened the other doors. So I got involved in a lot of stuff. I did senior tennis. When I was talking about the high school football, we did a high school football show every Friday night at the station in Richmond. And the other stations I was at too, but that was just part of what the gig was. So you did the reps. I mean, that's what I tell young folks now. You have to do the reps of doing these games after game after game. I don't even remember all the games that I went to and did over the years, but I do know that you had to do the reps, which is why I still love doing them now. I've been doing the analyst role for VMI for quite a few years now. When I left television, the idea was not to continue to do all the TV things I had done. And I left television because, as you know, my oldest son and you're good friends, and he was in high school at the time where he was swimming, and my younger one was playing soccer, and I was missing stuff because you can't work Friday night, and all day Saturday and see anything that your boys are doing. And I didn't like it. I mean, I was ready to be dad. Yeah. And so once they got a little further along, then it was easier for me to get back into it. And I've been very fortunate to be able to get back into doing some of those things. So I did a lot of everything. I mean, I tried to get involved with everything. We did the state open golf tournament in our station for years. I did senior tennis. It was kind of fun to do people like John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors playing tennis. That's pretty cool stuff. We had the senior women come to town years ago, and Martina Navratilova and Chris Everett, who I had a crush on when I was younger. Oh my goodness, I always loved Chris Everett. These folks are in town. So to be able to do those kind of things, I've been very fortunate over the years. I mean, very fortunate. I got asked the other night, I was doing another podcast, and they asked, well, you know, give us some of the bigger games that you got to do. And I knew there was a younger audience. I said, how many of you have heard of Drew Brees? And of course, they knew who Drew Brees was. Drew Brees' senior year at Purdue, they were hosting Notre Dame. They had never beaten Notre Dame at home, ever. But this year they did. And I was doing sidelines and I had Drew on after the game. I've got a picture of that down the hall. It's just really kind of cool. During the game, I was doing sidelines and we got his mom calling a touchdown pass. It just happened to be up there at the right time. Got me throwing a touchdown pass. And she's, it was great. But the other big thing for me at that time was the two folks I got to work with. Brent Musburger, who was one of my heroes growing up, did play-by-play for that game. And a guy named Dan Faust that played for the San Diego Chargers, did color. And then the person producing that game was a guy named Bob Goodrich. And Bob Goodrich was the executive producer of ABC College Football. And to work with Bob Goodrich is still one of the greatest things for me. In fact, I was texting with him last week. Luckily, I've been able to stay in touch with him for years. But to make those kind of contacts and to work alongside those folks was just, it still kind of blows me away that I was able to do that. And so I'm very appreciative of what took place over those years.
Yeah, even I don't follow college football that much, but Brent and Dan, I know those names.
Yes.
Yeah, that's insane.
It was insane. It was insane. But you're the soccer guy, and my youngest playing soccer. And you talk about the soccer. We made a traverse. It was 8 years ago to see the EPL, and his team's Tottenham. So now that's become my team. So we went to Tottenham. Was the first game we saw on a Saturday, and we saw it till midway through the second half, and they were winning big, 3 or 4-0. And then we ran to Chelsea and saw Chelsea play. So we saw 2 games in one day, and that was one of the coolest things. So I'm a big fan of the EPL now as well. And of course, he's a big Messi fan. So you have to be a Messi fan with him or he'll kick you out of the club. So, I enjoy all of it. I really do. And of course, with my oldest swimming, my goodness, I've fallen in love with the swimming.
Yeah. I think
so it's amazing how you change over the years and that you really enjoy.
Yeah. One of the things that your first answer that I was thinking about is this season when we were playing for the Fire, one of the things that they started doing was streaming their games on Twitch. And that's a new thing as well. And one of the things that made me think about in relation to you was almost the dilution of fans to local teams. And if you've seen that as you're through your years in the industry and kind of what your take on that is, because I know given some of the NFLs and NBA, they've had some not political issues, but some things where people have kind of turned off to it, but the availability of all these other teams to watch is now there. So what are your thoughts on that sort of phenomenon?
Well, if you think about it, a lot of people are transients. I mean, I didn't grow up in Virginia, but we've been here since 1988. I grew up in Georgia. So you'd think, okay, well, all the Atlanta teams and all the Georgia teams, you're always going to be rooting for. Well, you couldn't see them when you moved to Virginia. Now you can see so many things that you couldn't see then. And especially in a big metropolitan area like Washington, D.C., you've definitely got folks transit that move in. So it's an opportunity for you to still be, on the team without living in the area. And I think that's why the EPL is having so much great success. NBC's not crazy. They put it on Peacock. Now it's on USA Network too. I mean, they're expanding that thing, and that program is sensational. Rebecca Lowe is as good as anybody I've ever seen hosting them. She's sensational. I'm a huge
she's
Rebecca
really good.
Lowe. Oh my gracious, she's off the charts. And she's good enough where they wanted her on the Olympics, and she's worked 2 or 3 Olympics too. So you really got to be top drawer to be in that realm. That's fun to watch. So I enjoy a lot of stuff. Folks might not even think some of those things that I know anything about. I'm not saying I'm deep into it or I know a lot about it, but I enjoy watching it and enjoy being a part of it.
Yeah, that was so. And then one of the other thoughts I had based off your last question, but also a couple of the podcasts that I've done recently, there's been this we've all touched on the idea of like people being at the top of their game in whatever industry they're in. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is like, you don't often think of like what it means. Like you mentioned Rebecca Lowe, you don't often think of what it means to be at the top of your game as a anchor. What does that mean for like, what are the things that like, that you notice with her, or like that you try to do when you were anchoring, or like what sorts of things like mark a top like sports anchor or sports reporter?
I think it's different for me with different sports and with different positions. I just think Rebecca Lowe does such a great job of running the show. She is the quarterback of that team, and whoever is working on the sides, whether she's got both of the Robbies or whoever else she has there, she's getting them in and out of the questions quickly. She's getting into the commercial break. She's getting into the highlights. She just has a great pacing about her, and I think that's something that you really have to work at. It comes naturally to a lot of folks, but you really have to work at that. And it's just something that I think she's really done a great job with. And it really depends, having, as I told somebody, I'll go back to the Musburger story. I'd listened to Brandt Musburger forever, it seemed like, when he was hosting the NFL Today on CBS years and years ago in the NFL when my uncle played. And then to hear him in your earpiece and to just hear how marvelously he described and saw things. And it just made you realize just how good this guy was. And I had a lot of people that I got to work with like that. And one of my favorites is a guy that you may know from being in sports in Washington, D.C. is a guy named Tim Brandt. And Tim Brandt was just marvelous to me. I had a bunch of games with him. In fact, I had probably the game that was the most difficult game I ever had to do. But Tim Brandt was just sensational. That game was Texas A&M years ago. At Texas A&M, they built this big log fire, it's a jamboree, and it crashed, and 12 youngsters died during that mishap. And I'll never forget, I was lucky enough to get the president from Texas A&M on with us before the game and before it started, and just I got him. I couldn't believe it. Nobody could believe it. And that was the first time we made a real public statement about what had taken place. And to have that opportunity to allow him that platform, and it was a network game, so it was all across the country, and to have that moment for him and for that school in such a difficult time meant a lot to me. It also meant a lot to me that the guy coaching the other team, Mike Brown, had become a dear friend. I mean, just really was sensational. And to have both of those situations, because Mike handled it like I'm not sure any other coach could have handled it. And it was a tough situation. And he told me years later, he said, if I look back now, we probably shouldn't have played the game. We got beat, but that wasn't the important thing. I just don't know if it was the right thing to play the game. And I think he's probably right. But hindsight's always perfect 20/20. But that was a moving day that day, and just to be on the sidelines to do that was amazing. And Tim Brandt could not have been better to work with. I still think a lot of Tim Brandt.
Those situations seem to bring out the best in people that you don't see, like with the coach and the president. And so when you're there, you have to kind of allow your emotions to kind of be off to the side almost, because you've got to let them do them. Is that difficult in that situation, or had you had enough sort of experience by that time that you were like, no, this is his time to give the statement? Or like walk me through that a little bit, because I can imagine not like the level of composure that you needed to have to get that done and to ask the right questions and to know when to lay off and let him talk and not interject, like all that stuff that's a lot.
We have a limited amount of time, and I told him that as I said, this might only be one question, just depending on how much, how long you go. And the guy directing was a guy named Bruce Clark, who I don't know how many games I did with Bruce. And Bruce said, all right, Chipper, you got him. Here's what we're going to, it's coming to you. And, we got to hit the brake. So he said, you got to throw it to the brake. And I went, got it. So we had a very short window to get the president on, to get what he was going to say and then get to the break, because you had to get the game kicked off on time. So I had been in similar situations, but not to that degree and not that big a stage as like a network game, where you don't know how many eyes are watching, and you never think of that. I just wanted to try to give that president his opportunity to say what he felt like he needed to say, and for me to kind of get out of the way. And I can remember thanking him and telling him that I thoughts and prayers of everybody associated with the network, and I was kind of speaking for the network at that moment with you and all of Texas A&M. And then we went to the break, and I can remember that's somewhat how it was. I don't remember the exact verbiage, obviously, but I think that was the best I could have done at that moment, and I felt comfortable about it. He was very gracious and said, "Thank you for having us on," and I was more grateful that he would do that, and so that was powerful. But there's some funny things that happened too. I got one of my favorite ones is Nick Saban was the head coach of Michigan State. They had a guy that was a receiver by the name of Plaxico Burress. You've probably heard of Plaxico.
I know him. Yeah, he used to play for the Steelers.
Yeah, Plaxico. They're playing Michigan. He had 222 yards receiving, and they beat Michigan that day. It was a big deal. So Lloyd Carr was the head coach at Michigan, and I had had enough Michigan games and been around Lloyd enough. They had a quarterback that kind of got hurt in the first half. We didn't know if he was going to start the second half, and so Tim Brandt again doing the game, and a guy named Mike Golick was doing color. You might have heard of Mike Golick. I mean, yeah, he's been around a little bit. So anyway, I said, I'll find out. So I got in the huddle with Michigan. they're in the huddle getting ready to start the second half. Got the mic, and I said, got him, Bruce, so please throw it down to me. Tim throws it down to me, and Lloyd Carr turns, and I said, Coach, will so-and-so start the second half? Yes, thank you. Back up top. And they were all dying laughing. What were you doing in the middle of the huddle? I said, how else am I going to get to Lloyd Carr? That's who we needed to have to give us the answer. So, you do what you kind of have to do and chase folks down if you had to. I had to chase Frank Beamer down to Virginia Tech one game. He got caught in the middle of the field, and I'm out there grabbing him. I said, come on, Coach. And, of course, I've known him as long as I've been in Richmond. And he's like, wherever you lead me, I'll go. Just get me out of this mess. So I'm pulling him. And some of those things are funny on the sidelines. The sidelines is a funny place because at that time, there weren't anybody else down there. There was nobody down there. You had no help. You didn't have anybody but you and a camera person. So you're trying to get a camera person. All right, you stay in there, you're coming with me. And then you run out and you're about tackling these folks and pulling them back on the field with you or off the field or wherever you got to go to try to get this interview. And time again matters because, you got to either hit the next game or you're trying to hit back to the network. And that was kind of fun because you just never knew what you might get. And that, just kind of was some funny stories over the years. There really were, but I wouldn't have traded it for the world. Loved every minute of it.
Yeah, that's a learned skill. I feel like being able to butt your head in where it's not really supposed to be to get an answer that you need. I don't know. I know now a lot of coaches and players aren't like, they get a little bit annoyed with it. Like, or sometimes like Greg Popovich, he'll give like very funny answers. Be like, oh, what went wrong for you? And he'll be like, they scored more than us. And he'll be like, all right, well, good answer, Greg. And then kind of.
Well, he and Sager had a great thing going. I mean, it was hilarious.
Yeah, those two were great.
Sager. It's like Barkley now. Just put Barkley on anywhere, and he's hilarious TV. Then you've got Ernie Johnson, who's just the consummate right down the middle guy. Another guy I've known for a long time. It's just as good a human being. And there he is. He's refereeing that trio, and that's a hilarious trio.
It is.
Jack and the Jet. They don't need games to talk about. They can talk about anything.
Yeah,
people watch it.
Ernie does a very good job. I made a joke at one point that halftime show should win an Oscar just for best comedy.
Yes, it is, and it's night in and night out. I tell folks, there's not an off night for them. They're funny every night. Mm-hmm. That's hard to do.
It is.
Really hard to do.
For the anchor, for Ernie's perspective, I don't imagine that you would have had a situation similar to that. But what, like, when you watch him kind of keep those three under control a little bit, what is like what's going through your head? Because as somebody that sat in that spot on different shows, you could, like, I know you can imagine, like, okay, we got to get to commercial, but Shaq has just chased Kenny to the board, or like somebody pushed a Christmas tree over on him. Like, I know,
Yeah.
like, what's going on in your head when he's when he's going through that.
The beauty there, and this has to happen. Those other guys have got to know they have to rely on you to get them in and out, and they have to read your eyes. And a lot of times with your eyes, you can, or the nodding, or there's some things that you can do that may be off camera. You can even do the wrap it up. If you're on camera, you still really have to do facial expressions, but they know each other so well. And that's something that you just kind of have to teach, and you kind of have to learn from each other. And so you learn body language and signals and so forth. And they do it really well. But that's what I think you always do. And really fortunate. I never had anybody that really just kept going. I mean, and hopefully I was good at signaling. I hope that was part of it. And if it's live, you can't take it back. Once it's out there, it's okay. There we go. So, but I think that's the best. It's chemistry. The chemistry has to be good. And it's back to Rebecca Love. Her chemistry with those guys, very good. Ernie's chemistry, sensational. I mean, these people are really good at the craft. Really good.
Yeah. Ernie feels like he's built for that.
He is
built for that role. Yeah.
Well, and his dad was a sensational baseball broadcaster forever. I grew up listening to Ernie Johnson, and it was in his blood. It was in little Ernie's blood. And little Ernie is just one of the finest people. And any of your folks listening, go back and listen to Ernie's story about his son that he told at the University of Alabama. All you got to do is Google Ernie Johnson, University of Alabama. And he got up and told a story. And if you haven't heard it, you should. It's something that you should listen to. It's unbelievably sensational. And that young man died back during the fall. So it's just one of those amazing stories that everybody should listen to.
Yeah, I think they played that video on Inside the NBA right after his son passed away. Yeah, lots of tears for sure. Ernie's he's some human, man.
He is.
Human.
He is.
All right.
His wife is too. Yeah. His wife. Amazing.
All right. Off the sad stuff. So did you always want to do this growing up? Because I know I have a couple friends. For example, my one friend John, who's been on the podcast before, he's more into the writing side rather than the broadcasting side. But he did some games for George Mason, some basketball games for George Mason. Yeah. Is that something that you always wanted to do? And then also, I want to caveat that question with like the guys that you worked with earlier in your career that went on to like Brandt and Dan and like all these people that are now like famous at ESPN or whatever. Did you want to do that, or did you figure, no, I want to settle down with my family? Like, what was that for you? So like, I guess the first question is, did you always want to be a sports broadcaster? And then the second question is, was there I'm enjoying the local stuff and the college stuff, and I'm going to settle down here type deal?
All right. Let's see if we can start with the beginning of that. I started on the radio when I was 19, and I fell in love. And at that time, you were a disc jockey, so you played records, 45 RPM, 33s, vinyl. And so I loved doing that. And that's when I started broadcasting high school football games and fell in love with that. And so I started doing that more than doing school work. Did not do well in school, stayed out for a while. When I went back, I got involved with the newspaper. I wrote for 2 years because I thought it was imperative that I had some writing background. Now, there's two different writing. When you write for a newspaper, you write for something that's print, or you write for something that folks are going to read. That is writing for the eye. If you're going to be radio or on television, you're writing for the ear. And it is a great deal of difference, But to have that background Because for me, the radio allowed me to learn to ad lib, because you had to ad lib. So the newspaper allowed me to do the other. And then I had a guy in Atlanta who was like my big brother, who I stayed in touch with all of my life. He was on the air in Atlanta in television. And I used to go watch him, and everybody thought I was his little brother, which thrilled me to no end, because we do kind of look alike. He looks like my family. It's hilarious. And Bill said, look, when you get through messing around, get your college degree, you come over, we'll make a tape, and then you go out the door. So my wife and I were dating at the time before we got married. So she went with me. I had never sat on a set. I knew nothing about television. He propped me up on the WAGA TV5 news set, and we ran through it 3 or 4 times. And he said, you've got a resume tape now. Go get them. So I went banging on doors. And I was very, very fortunate to get hired in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which at that time was the 79th or 80th biggest market in the country. There were 230 or 40 markets at that time. So that lets you know that was miraculous to start with. The gentleman that hired me was a guy named Randy Smith. Randy had been on the Tennessee Ball Radio Network forever. Randy and I are still in touch. I have stayed in touch with Randy all of my career, and he's just been phenomenal to help me along the way too. But that's how the door opened. And I moved to move up in the world, so to speak, and to move to places that would fit better. So when I went to Birmingham, he almost ran me out the door, because he said, why would you stay here doing weekends in Chattanooga when you can go do weekdays in Birmingham? It's a much bigger market. Okay, so I did, stayed there for a year, and then Asheville, North Carolina, once again, another bigger market. And then my wife, before we got married, was working for the United States Senate in Washington, D.C. And the only way we could get halfway close was for me to try to move here, because she had really a great job. So Richmond opened up, came here. We thought we'd be here a year or two, and that was 1988 when I came here. So that gives you an idea that this became home. I always wanted to try to continue to do things. So I kept doing radio in all of the stations that I was in. I did 15 years at the country station here in Richmond, because I thought that was important. So I'd go tape after our late shows during the week, and I was on the radio. Sometimes I was live, not all the time, but sometimes I was live too. But I always wanted to do more, because that made you more valuable. It also gave you a little extra money coming in, but it also kept honing the skills so I could do some other things. And I made sure that I got into everything I could do. We did the 100th football game between Richmond and William & Mary, which was a big deal. And we did that on our local television station. I mentioned the state open golf tournaments. I just kept plugging away at stuff, and good things started happening. Randy got me my first real sideline job, and it was the old Oyster Bowl, is what they used to call in Norfolk. And it was Citadel playing BMI. And the gentleman I met there was a guy named Dan Shoemaker. And Dan Shoemaker is the one that got me into Fox Sports South and so many other places over the years. Dan was a treasure to be around. And Dan opened a lot of doors for me, because he would bring me along. And I started doing college basketball as well as college football. And so the steps just kept growing until the ABC happened. And when that happened, selfishly, that was the only thing I ever really wanted to do in television. I wanted to hold an ABC mic flag, the cube that says ABC on ABC Sports, ABC College Football. I wanted to do that so badly. And so to have the chance to do that, I felt like, okay, I had reached it. And then at that point, when I got to that, it got to be just impossible to keep doing that and to keep doing what I was doing in a local TV station. It just, I was able to do it for 3 years, a bunch of games, but it almost killed me in the process. 1 year, I did that Texas A&M game. The Blue-Gray game was on Christmas Day. I did that Christmas Day. And then I had the Citrus Bowl, which is the lead of those 3 big games. And that was the one my wife always says will be the biggest one for her, because it was on New Year's Day. I got to do the Citrus Bowl all in 1 year. And then I went back to do the Hall of Fame for that Blue-Gray Bowl in January. And I was physically beaten to a pulp. It was just very difficult. And I just knew I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep going at that pace. And, the boys were not very, very old at that time either. And it really wasn't fair to my wife, but she was great about encouraging me, but it just became so much. So I scaled back and started just doing where I could do and what I could do and what I thought could fit. and still I was able to do some, but not the number. Now it's easier. I can do that now. But I think sometimes if you work hard enough and if you make enough friends, and luckily over the years I have made some great friends that I've worked games with 25 years ago that I'm still in touch with. And when you make friends like that, then it's easy for good things to happen, and that's what has happened. I've been very, very blessed, and still am today. I still have things coming at me today that are a lot of fun for me to get to do. So hopefully that answered it. I don't know that I necessarily planned it to come out that way, but it did. And a couple of games I even did play-by-play for ABC. And then the guy that worked with me here in Richmond, he was working for ABC, the network itself, the news network part. And I said, Mark, I can't go do these games unless you're my spotter. So, he comes flying out, and we've stayed in touch since 1988. And so now he's way up in the hierarchy with CBS, and it's been fun to stay in touch with him over all these years too. So that's where it just kind of connects, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, that answered the question perfectly and more. I think goes to show, and that's one of the other things that I talk with people often, is like everybody has their own path in life, and like things just happen, and kind of you got to make decisions and move on. Like for you, was it the travel specifically that was really difficult?
Well, it was hard to get off because we were still doing those Friday night football shows, high school football shows that I helped sell here locally. And if you've got a game at Purdue, you don't fly out the day of the game to get to a game at Purdue. You have to go out the day before. So I had to start, shucking and jiving, so to speak. But that really didn't help matters. I mean, it made it worse here. And, there wasn't enough money for me to just do college football for ABC. Even if I'd had a full season package all the time, it wasn't going to be enough. Plus insurance, a lot of folks don't think about that. You got children, you better think about insurance. So, and that was really all ABC was doing that I could be involved with, was college football. So you weigh your checks and balances, and that was not going to be part of the plan. I made a trip to ESPN years ago, and they were talking about moving up there to do maybe one of the sports centers or something. I thought, wow, I just don't know if we could live where it's that cold, and that really wasn't my driving force to be on a sports center, to be doing something like that. I like the games. I love to do the games and to be live somewhere. And that led me to a lot of things. I mean, I've told folks this, one of the most fun things I ever had a chance to do was CIAA football and basketball. And that's HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities. And if you go to a place like Charlotte and you've got 25,000 fans to see the men's championship game, I don't know that it gets any bigger than that. Very cool to be there. We had Magic Johnson come. I interviewed Magic Johnson at halftime. I mean, think about that for a second. Magic Johnson is there. Sitting there and interviewing Magic Johnson. I mean, so you have all these things to happen over the years, and you're just thankful you had a chance to be a part of any of it.
Yeah. No, it's a really cool story. Also to see that the arc of decisions that were made as you kept moving, is like each decision is I don't know the right word. To me, it's impressive, but I don't know like the wherewithal to make each decision that you made along the way to continue or not continue. It all seemed to like have worked itself out in a way that, like, again, hindsight being 2020 is easy to say, but like as you run through the story, that makes all the decisions that you made make sense, and they all seem to have worked out, which is probably the most impressive thing to me, to be honest, because life is very challenging and convoluted, and so to be able to like navigate that, especially in a world like that where it's at the time maybe not as stable as another one. So that's really cool to me. Like you had your finger on the pulse of the industry, I think, in a really cool way.
Well, I think the background helped. I think the background helped with that because I had enough of and I took it as being very thankful to have that opportunity. I was appreciative of that. I didn't feel like somebody owed it to me. I wasn't I was thrilled to meet all those folks and just to be able to do the games. And that's really something I've always loved. I've always loved to do the games. And I don't think that'll ever stop. And it didn't matter what game or who was playing. I remember there was a guy named Fred Brandt at ESPN, and he says to me, he says, I got a feeling you don't care. I said, in basketball, it's 5-on-5 with the officials and 11-on-11 in football. I said, you're right, because it's still the game. And I said, doing some of the games, it's their Super Bowl when you go in and do their games. And you should treat it that way as if you're doing the Citrus Bowl. And he got the biggest grin out of his, and he just cracked up laughing and goes, I get it. I get it. The one that crushed me, though, I will give you one. There was one that I wanted to have happen because I was kicking along really good with ABC. And I was up doing senior tennis in New York. And a guy named Terry Ewert was the head of CBS Sports as far as their production and so forth, and producer. And he had me come to his office. I had to have an agent at that time. I never had an agent, but she was a dear friend of mine who had worked with me in Asheville and was a producer. So she called and she goes, CBS wants to see you. I said, about what? And she goes, I think they're going to throw something at you. And I went, you got to be kidding. She goes, no. So you got to find a way around the tennis to go over and see this guy. So I go over and I meet Terry Ewert. I mean, this is great stuff. So Terry says, okay, here's what we want to do. He says, what contract are you under at ABC? And I said, well, I'm really not under a contract. I said, I freelance out of it because I'm with an ABC affiliate. And he goes, okay, we don't care that you're with an ABC affiliate. Because he said, what we'd like to do is, they were doing NASCAR at the time. He said, we'd like for you to be on our NASCAR broadcast, our SEC college football, which, oh my gosh, I'm going, I grew up in Georgia. I'm a big Georgia Bulldogs fan. We're still celebrating for the first time in 41 years. We're in a national championship. That may never end for some of us. And then he said, we probably want you to do the Masters golf tournament with us and maybe NCAA, all this. I'm going, oh, you have to be kidding. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. So he had been there, I don't know, 17, 18, 20 years, whatever it was. It wasn't 3 or 4 months after we had this discussion, were they firing?
Oh, no.
So I'm thinking, I'm going to go to CBS. No, you're not going to go to CBS. But you know what? In the end, it worked out better. As much as I would have loved to have had all of that, it worked out better. And it worked out the way it should have. I mean, it really did. And I told somebody, I said, oh my gosh, I must have been really being greedy in my heart, thinking, oh, I'm going to get all of this, but I wouldn't have traded the ABC folks for anything. They were so good to me. So good. It's just, I'll tell you another crazy story, because this is, I have to tell you this one. Virginia Tech is playing Florida State in the Sugar Bowl, which really was a national championship game that year. Mm-hmm. And here we are as a local television station, and we're on the sidelines an hour before kickoff. That was an ABC game. Jack Arute was one of the sideline folks. Jack Arute I'd gotten to know really well, but Jack Arute had laryngitis. So Howard David, who was the head of ABC Sports, knew I was there, and he called me to come. I had not met him in person. He says, Chip, I just want you to know, if Jack doesn't have a voice, you're going to do the sidelines for Virginia Tech. And I went, well, he said, end of the discussion. And I went, and he said, we'll do whatever we need to do to help you, because I know you got your show before and after the game, right after the game. I said, you knew that? And he goes, I know everything going on for this game. And I went, okay, I understand. So we're doing, luckily Jack's voice came back, so that's the first thing. But we're on the field and the sidelines an hour before they're going to the ABC broadcast and with a kickoff. Nobody told us we weren't supposed to be there. So we're there, and the Sugar Bowl people want us to leave the field. Well, some of my ABC folks are around. I'm telling them what's going on. And it didn't take long before one of the head honchos comes down and has a very unpleasant discussion with the guy from the Sugar Bowl, and makes sure that he understands in no uncertain terms that I'm with them and that we are going to complete this show, and that as soon as the game's over with, I'll be back in this position and we'll be back on the air again. And then he turned to me and he goes, not a problem. I could have hugged him at that stage because I thought they were going to throw us out. And Lynn Swan, you probably heard of Lynn Swan, Swan. I got to know Lynn Swan real well. Lynn Swan came over to the live shot with it. It was just one of the greatest shows I was ever a part of. And it was really neat to pull that off. I don't think anybody else will ever try to do that. But yeah, we were dumb enough to think we could. And I figured, well, ABC can't hurt us because it is an ABC game. So I didn't tell anybody differently and didn't know any differently. So we really got lucky there. But that was fun to do that because I know it won't happen again.
Hey, sometimes you just gotta, that happens from time to time. Like that happened in a very much smaller way to me. We were hosting, Mary Washington was hosting the NCAA D3 basketball tournament. And I guess like the university had reserved the first like 4 rows of the Anderson Center.
Yeah.
And so like we didn't know that, but we had, because it was in the student section, so we had gone down there and there was a couple of like students already there who were like seniors. I think I was a freshman or sophomore at the time, and some lady tries to come kick us out because we don't have the right passes, and the guy who's the senior who's got his face painted turns around to the lady and he's like, no, they're supposed to be here, they're with me. And I didn't really know him at all, and so she was like, oh, okay, whatever. She left and he was like, don't worry, got you guys, because we need to be loud today, or like whatever. But yeah, sometimes you just gotta, those situations are just, they're really nice when they happen to you, for sure.
Right.
I mean,
and they never told us we couldn't.
mhm.
That was the thing. So we just planned to do. I thought about wearing some UMW stuff tonight, but I figured that might be too much. You might not want me to come out with a little UMW.
Nah, it's fine.
I've got plenty.
I'm sure.
And today was Dean Rucker Day on campus.
Yeah, I did hear. Yeah, he's quite the fit. He's for those that don't know who Dean Rucker is, he's probably the nicest person, one of the nicest people I've ever met. Like he posts on everybody's timeline for their birthday, and it's not just happy birthday, it's like a full thought out sentence of like, I hope you have the nicest of birthdays, my dear friend, with like all of it. And like, from him, it's not like he means it, and it's always nice to hear from him.
He will be missed on campus. He's one of the most amazing people I've ever met, and I love him to death. It's hard for me to imagine the school without him.
Yeah,
and, we swap stuff all the time. So I know he's going to the Peace Corps. I hope I could still stay in touch with him. I don't know what limitations you have when you're with the Peace Corps, or if he'll even have service. I don't have any idea, but he'll do a phenomenal job there too.
Yeah, wherever he goes. I want to touch back to the game reporting, because I didn't get to ask this because I didn't want to interrupt your stories. But what about the games? Like, what about the games specifically made you want to do those rather than go into like the studio more, or those other things? Like what? Because you mentioned it could be any event, whether it's tennis or any sport. But like, what about being on the sideline, like specifically for you? Is it the competition aspect? Like what was it for you?
I love the crowd, the live atmosphere, because I think you can feed off the crowd, and I think you can feed off the atmosphere. And there's something about doing games. I've always loved the thrill of the game and the fun of the game. And I just think that's something that's just in me. I can't tell you. Now, I loved anchoring on a local television station. I mean, I would not have done it 26 years if I didn't enjoy that. But it was different, much different from doing a game. And I don't know. That's just something that's always I've enjoyed, whether I was doing play-by-play, whether I was doing an analyst role, or whether I was doing the sidelines. It didn't matter. It was just to be there and to be a part of it. And to watch folks do their thing and to see it live and just be a part of it. Small part.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears a little bit. So doing all the local stuff for such a long time, obviously, like you've been very involved in the community, and so I know from all the Googling that I did and all the stories that Dallas has told me, you're heavily involved kind of in a philanthropic way with the community outside of the sports reporting. So like, was that something that was a natural progression for you, having been doing the local sports? And then how did you sort of transition into doing that?
Well, we had so many great opportunities at the TV station in Richmond. and that's where I'll stay, because there were so many years. I was here for 23 years.
Right.
We did the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Telethon for every one of those years, and I'm not sure anything was more difficult and yet more rewarding than doing those telethons. Many of those young people did not make it a long time and have an impact still on me. To bring them a smile, to let them know that we cared about them. There's some families that I still run into that had young folks who passed from that dreaded disease. But just to know that we helped them somehow, some way, and that was really important to me. And so that spun into other things that we were involved with. But the station was heavily involved in the telethon. And that was back at a time that when telethons were a big deal. And MDA does not do a telethon anymore. Jerry Lewis kind of left as he was kind of he was getting up in age, and it was difficult for him to even try to do a telethon. They kind of tried to move away from that, trying to find some other avenues to make money and to bring money in to raise money for help. And but to be there, and it pushed us into other things. We did other things over the years that made you really want to get involved. And I've had a long involvement with Special Olympics in Virginia, and the head office is here in town. I served on their board for 6 years, and still like to try to help out any way I can. And still today, there's a lot of folks who are executive directors that I'm in touch with their nonprofit. They've had a tough time during COVID for a lot of reasons. A lot of folks have. So to try to support them means a lot, because they do services that it's amazing what a lot of these folks do, and you should support them. And that's what we've always felt, always believed, and I don't think that will ever change. It's in my heart to try to help folks.
One last question, because I know it's getting a little bit late, but to wrap all this up, as we've been talking, you've talked about a lot of emotional highs and lows, and a lot of the ones that you've experienced from game to game, like doing 3 bowl games and right back to back. When you're supporting the team or playing on the team, you just have that one for that season, but you experience them all like quick in a row. And then obviously with the other work that you've been doing with the telethons and other things, how has that affected you, both just like generally, but also I feel like for me personally, that might end up start to take a toll at some point. Did you notice that, or how are you able to cope with that, or kind of walk me through? Because if your team loses a really close game, or especially if you're playing, being an athlete in the game, some of those wins and losses can stick with you for a long time. So kind of walk me through how that kind of went for you.
Difficult when we had young folks pass from muscular dystrophy. It was difficult, but you knew that going in that was always a possibility. So it was not always a shock that it had happened, but it happening itself was the shock. You never get numb to it by any stretch, but you also know that there's family left behind too that's really having to deal with it. So I don't think it ever knocked me down, because I felt like I needed to keep trying to lift folks up. We talked about Dean Rucko, his birthday thing. My wife has teased me for years. Everybody I'm connected to on all of the social medias that I'm on, I do the same thing with the birthdays every day. And it could be 10, it could be 30, who knows? And there's no telling what it is for a year. But I think it's important. And folks may not see it for a month or 2 weeks or 6 months or whenever they get back on that social media. But it's amazing, I think, what it does when you remember other people, so they know they are important. They do matter. And that's what I've always believed. And if you can spread some joy and spread some love to some other folks and let them know you truly care. People don't care what you know until they know you care. And that's been something I've always believed. And so I've always tried to be as nice to folks as I can and try to get to know them as much as they want me to. And I think that carries you through everything. And I try to love everything I get involved with, because I think it matters to folks. You know, and we'll go back to the boys. I knew zero about soccer growing up, where I grew up. I knew zero about swim growing up. I mean, zero. And yet, because of my boys, I've gotten to go and do things and be a part of things I never, ever would have known or enjoyed. Same with my wife. She's taken me to places I would have never thought about going. They're just the greatest experiences in the world. We've made some trips with some of these groups that you take trips with, Backroads and others, and I've met some of the greatest people in the world, but it's because of her. And once again, you have to be open to go, and you have to be open and be willing to kind of open yourself to have those feelings, because I think those feelings are what makes you human, and having that opportunity. And those things matter. Staying in touch. I've always told my boys, stay in touch with people, because I always go, Dad, how do you know these people? And I went, I stay in touch. My youngest was a huge Kobe Bryant fan, huge Kobe Bryant fan. Gentleman here in Richmond played in the NBA for 10 years. His name was Terry Davis. Terry Davis' son, guy you probably heard of, Ed Davis. Mm-hmm. Ed played at North Carolina. Yeah. He was playing with the Lakers at that time. I called Terry. I said, Terry, my son's a huge fan of Kobe. You got any tickets? He said, yeah, you can come sit with me. So I put my Davis by Terry Davis so he could watch the game and he could ask questions. Kobe had an unbelievable first half. Then he got a little bit of an ankle tweak in the second half. So he didn't get to meet him, but he did get pictures with Ed Davis, and he did see the Lakers play. And we're sitting there in the Lakers section, which was pretty cool too. So it was a neat moment, but I wouldn't have thought about going up there to see this. Davis didn't want to go. And a big deal that would be for him to go see Kobe. And Terry Davis is a dear friend of mine. He played in college here at Virginia Union, smallest school here in town. Ben Wallace, who just went in the NBA Hall of Fame, same guy Ben Wallace told me, and I didn't know. Excuse me, boys are cracking on me here. He told me this last year. I thought he was going to get in last year. And he said, I need to tell you this. I don't know if I ever told you. I said, what is it, Ben? He said, you were the first person to ever interview me on television. And he said, I always want to thank you for that, because you're always so nice to me. And I thought, you were the one who was good to me. I don't feel like, you know, I did anything different for Ben than for anybody else, but he thought I did, because he said, you took care of me. And I know I did that because I tried to take care of everybody. But to think, you know, here's a guy who's been pretty successful, NBA Hall of Famer. That's pretty nice for him to remember you. And when I see him, he bear hugs me. You know, I don't come up halfway. I'm about maybe right here, you know, and I mean, he's huge. So, yeah. But some of those stories, they are so important to me. And it not just those guys who are the names, but they're just as many as guys who were good players who got to play in college. And, you know, those guys meant just as much as anybody, and they knew that. You know, I loved all of them. Still do. Still love being around. So that's kind of where that goes. And it's been fun. I'm still having fun with it. I just turned 29, so okay, I'm a little over it. But I tell folks I'm only 29 because I feel that way. I feel 29, which is true. I still feel like $1 million. So you want to keep going. No need to stop. But I'm not playing soccer anymore. I'll get into that. I keep playing that and get hurt with.
Fair enough. I think that's a great way to close this out. Very wise words. Yeah, you said it all. I don't have anything to add.
Wow, that's pretty good if I did that. Wow. I have to send you a check or something for that one, I guess.
Oh, stop it. I really appreciate your time and your insights. Definitely have a lot to think about moving forward with myself, my own life for sure. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. You'll do great. I got great confidence in you. You put up with Dallas, so hey, you got to be a good guy. I mean, you put up with him and wedding coming up, and you fit the jackpot on who you're marrying. I don't know what else you need to have going for you. You're still playing soccer. What else do you need? You got your own podcast. My goodness, what else? We didn't even know what a podcast was until a few years ago. I never heard of that. Didn't know what it was.
I know. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Think you're sitting
It's
here
crazy.
Zooming as a podcast. I mean, it's just nuts. So, and that you're doing video and audio. There's no ends to it. I don't know where it's going to go.
Who knows? We'll find out, won't we?
Who knows? I hope I'm around to see more of it. But like I said, at 29, I think I got a pretty good chance.
Yeah, you'll be around. You'll be around for a little while.
Well, it's been fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. We should do this again sometime soon.
Sounds great. Would love to.
All right. With that, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.